Sorry boys, looks like this one is my victory. Honey, I'm hot. Mate, we really need to talk about all of what's happening there. It really feels like at this point you could really use some help. Wait, now, I understand that this looks like it might be a little bad, but trust me when I say this, I've gotten good resources this time. We're gonna win back all of the money and we'll be fine. Hey, look around you! Do you honestly see what's happening right now? Haha, don't be silly, what are you talking about? See, I'm just playing it all out with my friends right here. You finally realized that, huh? Yeah, it really does feel like it's a lot more serious than we thought. We really might need to get you some help at some point. Okay, look, maybe you're onto something here, but don't you worry. You see, the thing is what I was planning to do was that since everything else that we tried to do to earn money till now didn't really work out, I figured that maybe, just maybe, gambling might be the best way to go about it. And to that end, I even got this game right here just to help with that. Good game assistance, you say. I don't believe that any game you get would even be Mate, how do you constantly end up getting like garbage like this? I don't know if you know, but I don't think this thing, whatever it is gonna really help teach you to be a gambler in any way, shape or form. But it probably would teach you how to be a horrible person, so I guess it does do something in a way. Though, looking at the game that's going on there, it does seem like things are going very well. That said, I don't think there's gonna be any much money coming out of that, so I tell you what, this isn't gonna help you. Let me have this, I'll go make a video about it, and explain to you why this game wouldn't actually help you with the whole, like, gambling thing that you got going on there. Yeah, you go on and do that. I'll continue to try and increase my winnings against my friends right here, am I right? Oh wait, before you go, I kinda might need a little bit of help, because you see, I kinda spent a little too much money on all of this, so I kind of took out a little bit of debt in your name. I can't pay it back, so I'm gonna need you to do a little bit of, you know, like what now? You know, what? Just help me out here a little. Now, I get what some of you might be thinking, especially those of you who watched the last video and like recognize the shirts that I wear in the videos. Like, bruh, did you get your shirts reversed or something? Like, clearly the two shirts fit a lot better with the opposite video instead. Like, what gives? Well, for those of you who didn't know, the previous shirt is basically for an album that says Enter the Purgatory, which I do feel actually fits with this video a lot better, but at the time I wasn't thinking too hard about it, and that's really the only reason why. But yes, pay no mind to the clearly not fake tissue with red paint on my ear. I just had to lend it to the bugger so that he could pay back his debt. Well, we'll wait for him to get back with it, then maybe I can remove this. But anyways, that's not really important. What is important, however, is that usually when we talk about Kusogame games on this channel, we're talking about games that are on the list for the Kusogame Game of the Year. A list that has been run for more than 10 years at this point, where people in Japan vote for what they think is the worst game of the year, and then this is then reviewed by a group of people who then decide which ones out of all the games that released in the year could be considered the worst of the worst. And the thing with that list, for those of you who have noticed, is that most of the games on it are for mainline consoles or the PC. So your Switch, your PS2, your PS3, Xbox, what have you not. And the reason for this is because mobile games, or at the very least what is considered portable console games, aren't something that are usually put on the same list with all of these other games, and there is a reason for that. What? Oh, I can have my ear back now? Ah, thank God. Yeah, it was getting to be quite a pain, like holding this to my ear and all. I could really smell the paint as well. The reason why these games are typically separated from mainline console games is because the standard that people have held for games on a portable console have always been lower due to the fact that you have fewer buttons you can use as controls, the specs of the console itself is lower, and as a result, the people who created the list have always held it in good reason that these two should therefore be separated, because what would then classify as a Kusogame game on your DS, your PlayStation portables and the like, would be very different from what would then be considerable a Kusogame game on the PS3. And the game we're going to be talking about today is one game that comes from the list of portable console games instead. And the reason for this is because of the fact that I really want to introduce this list and its existence, and how bad the games on it are as well before we go back and forth between the two. And also because I feel like there's a little bit more of an affinity, I guess you could say, with this game for me especially. Because as you guys remember, or hopefully you do from the like first ever Kusogame video I ever did, the game we talked about then was a game called Nugya, a game made by Idea Factory, a company that was in Japan at the time, notorious for making a lot of Kuso games. Nowadays, people know them for stuff like Hyperdimension Neptune and stuff like that, which doesn't do as bad. Like, it tends to be fine to slightly above average, nothing too insanely good, but nothing on the level of a Kusogame. And the game we have today is a game that was also made in 2008, and it was technically also made by Idea Factory as well. So yeah, they managed to get their way onto running up on both of the lists at once. Though that said, rather than being developed by Idea Factory directly, with this game it was developed by Compound Heart, which is a subsidiary of Idea Factory instead. But like I said in that video as well, I want you guys to understand that I'm not a hater or something like that. Right, we talk about Kuso games from all companies except when like it's like some small like Timmy's first game and stuff like that. We don't make fun of that because like when you're first going into making games, the games you make tend to be shit. It's a thing that we all have to go through. I went through that as well. And the thing is that as a result, we don't make fun of stuff like that. We only make fun of stuff made by people who should be able to make good games. And as a company that has been around for almost 20 years, maybe like even more than 10 years, even at the time that this game was released, they should have known better. And so I'm making fun of them equally as we do with all other companies. And as I have shown in some of my other videos, I am a fan of some of their later titles. And the game we are talking about today is... That's it, another reason why I chose this clothing was also because I wanted to try to mimic what he was wearing on the cover of the game as much as possible. How do you like it? Mom, I want Kaiji. No, son, you have Kaiji at home. Gyakkyou Burai Kaiji DS. Or should I say, Desu or Survival? Because it's not very obvious, but under the DS it does say in like big, very, very tiny text, death or survival. You get it? Get it? DS? As a result, many shorten the name of this game to just Kaiji DS, since DS is both the name of the game as well as the console it's on, so it just kind of works out. For those of you who do not know what Kaiji is, it used to be a pretty popular series back in the day, and in fact it did influence many of the modern series that like shows that you see around the world as well. Things such as the Mr. Beast Squid Game as well as the normal Squid Game, and many other series such as Kakegurui as well, as this was a series that was themed around things such as gambling, but more so than the gambling itself, it was more about the social deduction skills that the people have to like try and figure out how people are cheating to try and get ahead, or to try to figure out ways to get ahead, all while being coupled with all of the human aspects, as well as the whole idea of the rich abusing the poor and in-depth that you did get within Squid Game as well. In fact, I would say that in spite of how old this series is and it being the original inspiration for Squid Game, I personally enjoyed this more than I actually did Squid Game, because I feel like it handled the themes a lot better and the way that the main character struggles through all of it and the position of the main character at the end a lot better than Squid Game does. I'm sorry, Mr. Beast. You have to try harder. That said, in 2023, the series actually achieved 30 million copies sold worldwide, putting it among some of the most successful manga titles out there. So, if you haven't seen it, I recommend giving it a look, unless you're not into very dark stuff in general, in which case don't watch it. It will actually put you into a bit of a bump. As you can imagine though, as a result, trying to make a game that would capture the essence of the series is very difficult. I mean, yeah, you do have games out there that basically try to turn the mini games within Squid Game into games, but one thing you will notice is that the games tend to be very simplistic and they would get old pretty quickly, and this is understandable because to begin with both of these series, the games weren't really meant to be the main thing about the show. The games were meant to be a backdrop to the more important actions and scenes within the show, which typically center around the characters instead, their interactions with each other and the suffering and the growth that they go through and all the depression that comes through the cruel world that they are put into. Hence why if you wanted to make a full price title that could capture what the series was about, it would have to be a game that focuses a lot on either allowing you to experience these character moments or something that actually goes the extra mile and basically gives you the ability to make all of the choices while also playing the mini games, meaning that a game that will allow you to basically make all of the moral choices and go through the scenes that the character goes through in the series, while also giving you the ability to alter the storyline completely, going to complete off-tangent paths by taking the opposite decision that the main character did at those points. Like, I feel like a series like that would have been very interesting if you could turn all of that into a game, and also if you could turn all of these social interactions and deductions parts of it into said game. Needless to say, this game manages to do none of that. In fact, I would say that the people who developed this game essentially just made a Squid Game simulator, except even worse than some of the fan-made Roblox levels, to be honest. Because this game doesn't do a good job of capturing the essence of the series the game was based off of, and on top of that, it isn't really very entertaining itself the way it presents the mini-games within the series. And with this series to begin with, the mini-games aren't as action-heavy as some of the ones in Squid Game, and so as a result, yeah, this made it a lot harder, I imagine, for this game to actually try to capture all of that. But, well, I feel like I've delayed us talking about the game itself for long enough. How bad is this game? Let's find out together. When you first fire up the game, everything seems completely normal. You get the standard Idea Factory Compound HUD logo followed by the main menu of the game. The main menu's UI parts seem to be a little crunchy. I get the feeling it's because they probably use like very poorly compressed JPEGs or PNGs or something. But up till this point, everything seems completely normal, and I do really like that due to the fact that all of this, it actually does fit in quite well with the themes of all the games that the characters play within the actual series itself, in the sense that every single thing you see here is a deception. It's all fake. It's all here to trick you into thinking that there's a sense of normalcy within this game. But as you'll see as we go on, that isn't really the case for the most part at all. Because once you boot up the main mode of the game, the story mode, you'll notice a few things immediately start to feel a little off. For one thing, they are actually using still frames from the anime itself, which is fine. This, in and of itself, I don't really have much of an issue with due to the fact that this is something familiar and that fans of the series will probably enjoy seeing, since these are the familiar scenes that they remember from the anime that started off everything that made the series what it is. But what is strange is that in spite of the fact that they got the rights to use these still frames from the original animators, because I did check the credits, they did actually have that, it seems, the entire game isn't voiced, which actually makes it feel a little weird due to the fact that if they could get the rights to use the animation stills, why couldn't they just reuse the audio tracks from the anime in the exact same way if they're trying to retell the story, right? Well, I know the answer to that. That was just a rhetorical question. Deception and fooling people, just like the theme of the anime. But yeah, the reason why this game is as a result not fully voiced is actually really funny, due to the fact that what actually happens is that they actually do rewrite a huge segment of the story to make it completely different from the original work. Yeah, and the thing is, if you're hoping for the story to actually be good, my friend, let's not forget who was the ones who wrote the plot for this game, right? We don't have things going well for us, I'm very sorry to say. But yeah, the opening scene itself is largely similar to the original work. This is the part where we're still in the normalcy segment where they're trying to deceive you into thinking that you bought something that was normal. Just in case you bought the game, maybe tested like 5 minutes of it before shutting it off and going home, and so you can't get your refund. This was that little bit of the original like Steam 2-hour refund period thing that they had in a way. For those of you who didn't know the series, basically all that happens is that Kaiji realizes that he is in debt because his friend threw his entire debt onto Kaiji. And in order to get rid of this debt, Kaiji essentially goes onto a cruise ship to play a very weird game of rock, paper, scissors with cards. And if he were to win and do well on this, he can basically not only get his entire debt cleared, but can basically earn a lot of money, which can then help him to jumpstart your life going forward, as you can basically cash out all of your rewards for even more money. But basically the concept for the game is very simple. Each player is given only 4 of each cards of rock, paper and scissors, and they are basically meant to use up all of the cards as they go around the ship, playing against the other players and trying to get as many of the stars, which are the items you have to wager, as possible, as each star can basically be cashed out for money at the end. And if you'd have at least 3 stars or 4 stars for returning players who apparently, because like this ship thing is actually a returning thing people can come back to like degenerate gamble on, then they would be able to be at least safe and not be sent off to become slaves, which is apparently what happens to all the people who do not have enough stars. And in spite of the fact that the game itself, the concept sounds really lame, it's kind of like in Squid Game where the main focus is not so much on the mechanics or the systems of the game itself and how in-depth it is, but it's more on how people interact with the games as they try to find ways to essentially win and get big as much as possible. And this is something the plot itself does go into quite a bit, with people trying to essentially just tie so that they can come out with 3 stars and cash that out, potentially, as well as some who actually want to play the game to try and earn as much as they can. And there are many ways that they went about it. The actual anime actually spent quite a few episodes on this, with everything as insane going on as people actually betraying each other, trying to actually scam others into giving them the stars for free, to there even being people who eventually ended up buying out the cards of other players so that they could ensure that they could tell like what proportion of the cards were with them, and therefore they could maximize their chances of winning, because not only do you have 4 of each cards, but on a board at the back of the entire venue, they actually show the total number of each cards left that have not been played. So if you essentially went to buy out the cards of other players to then use it to play against the people who are still in the game, you can kind of somewhat easier tell the probability that you could win and stuff like that. A lot of interesting stuff goes on within it. The reason why I spent a few minutes just explaining this is because I want to contrast it to what happens within the game. When you first start up the game and you actually are allowed to start playing within the cruise ship, among the first few people you can pick, the first guy is basically going to scam you out of 2 of your 3 stars. And this happens in the original anime as well, but with this you don't really get a chance to decide whether or not you want to accept his proposal. The game just automatically accepts it and basically takes away 2 stars from you. In case you were thinking that like in any other anime-based game, this is just them reenacting the story so it's fine as a plot point, that actually doesn't even end up being the case, because you can actually just avoid him altogether and not suffer any form of penalty from doing this. So really this only serves to punish people who don't know the IP and the story. And the thing is that it's not like the plot is set up such that there are multiple people who could do that. It's just that one guy, and you can just avoid him and basically earn a shit ton of money just by playing against the other people instead. I feel like this DS game just kind of misses out the entire point of why this game, this rock paper scissors, even exists within the series in the first place. Because really, with this series, a lot like many of the other series that come after it with rather similar themes, the focal point is not so much on the game itself, but on the way that people try to trick each other and interact and fool each other around the game itself. So the fact that that element is completely not there and you're just playing the game as is really kind of lame. And the thing is that before your first game over, even if you try to play against the others, it's really just completely random. You would just draw a random card from your hand and play against them as is, which was really not what happened for the most part that Kaiji was doing within the original series as well. Instead, what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to talk to some very specific people who, if you didn't watch the anime, they would just look like completely normal other mooks that you could play against as well. And if you were to talk to them specifically, they would basically tell you about some heart of the card sort of bullshit, something like, I don't know, it actually felt like some Yu-Gi-Oh thing where they're like, if you look at the card's heart and you use the power of will, you'll be able to reveal what the card is. And it's like, it felt completely horrible. That actually does not happen in the original anime, by the way. This was a contrived thing that they added into this, because instead of trying to focus on the human interactions part of the thing, what they decided to do was to actually allow you to actually play the games with mini games. So once you figure out about the heart of the cards from Yugi Muto, except he's a salaryman instead, you essentially gain the ability to do the thing that the angry video game nerd does in that one video.
That's right, we're gonna cheat.
Because really, once you figure out about the heart of the cards and how to wield its magical powers somehow, the game essentially turns into that one Austin Powers scene where they're playing blackjack and you can just see everyone else's cards. Which, the fact that this game, which is supposed to be based off a series that is taking itself seriously, actually has points that are making me compare it to Austin Powers, really feels like we have something that is going really wrong here. The minigame is essentially around just looking at the guy's deck, and depending on the person you play against, they will have a different way of drawing, and the game will basically flash a message on screen for like 1 second. It's really not enough time for you to actually read to figure out what to do after staring at all the cards. And that's something I found to be really silly to begin with. Basically, every single person has a separate behavior. So like guy A, you would look at his hand and then pick the card that he has the most number of like slips off left. And maybe for guy B, you would just have to pick like the card that's on the right of on a row of cards or something. The thing is, they will actually show you the cards first and then hide it really quickly. So like they might just show you like randomly the cards will just flash on screen a few times, and then they'll pop up a 1-second message after that telling you to guess what this card in the middle of all of those cards is, and then you just go sit there and panic and go like, I didn't even know what I was supposed to be looking out for because you only gave me like 2 fucking seconds to react to the thing. To be frank, if I really wanted to play a game where they're just going to go like, see this thing? Look for it in the stack over there like this, I think I would rather just play Where's Waldo instead, because of the fact that I can actually find that for free online, and it's actually a lot more challenging as well if you're actually into that kind of thing. And may I also add that the game over screen just looks really cheap as well. There's no music that plays, it's a still frame from the anime. The word game over kind of looks like it's a little pixelated as well. It looks horrible, and like, for a game that wants you to fail quite a fair bit to figure out what's going on, it just feels a little cheap that this is all they're gonna show you like that. But yeah, all you really have to do for this part is just play out the 12 cards in your hand. And once you play out the 12 cards, if you have 3 stars or more, you can essentially just progress on to the next mini game. I find the whole thing to be really sad. Like, first thing, like they show this board at the top of the screen as well, where you can actually see the whole like giant board with how many of each cards are left and the timer ticking down. It gives you a lot of vibes to the actual anime, but this actually doesn't matter to you since there are so many contestants and you can't really interact with like the mass majority of them, that it actually makes it feel like the number there doesn't do anything for you, especially if you have the Austin Power cheating powers. In my opinion, it makes it feel like the people who tried to develop this really just missed the mark on like what this entire segment was supposed to be about, and just decided to take the shitty game that they were playing within the part and turn that into a mini game with arguably more skill or based than luck based interactions by letting you cheat, but then that makes it just a very simple mini game instead. And the thing is that the entire game is just gonna be mini games like this but worse, so you're going downhill from here. But yeah, once you clear the minigame and move on to the next segment, this is where the first big divide between the plot of the original and the game would actually arise. Because in the original, Kaiji actually wins, but he actually ends up in even more debt than he was in before he entered the thing, and basically had to be forced to go into the second game. But that happened later on in the series. Basically after the cruise ship ends, he goes and works in a convenience store for a bunch, realizing that it's gonna be pretty hard for him to actually clear his debt. And out of the desperation, that's the important part, right? Out of the desperation of knowing that his situation was worse than before, he decides to go into this second game and try his luck for another time. In the game, you just play the card segment normally, you don't actually go into more depth or anything of the sort. Instead, once you complete the game, the big villain, or one of the big villains, Tonegawa, he will appear before you and go like, "Hey, you want your money? Well, piss off! You ain't getting your money until you play more." And then that's about it, you just move on to the next game because he basically holds the reward money that you were supposed to get as ransom to force you to take part in another game instead. But with this out of the way, we move on to the second game, which the name of the second game is a little confusing. I'm not too sure what best to call it in English due to the fact that the English Wikia for this game actually shows this game as being called the Human Derby, and the second half, which we'll talk about later, being called the Brave Man Road. But in the original work within Japan culture, Brave Man Road and Human Derby are both used for the first part of the thing, because essentially within the show, the name that they actually use is the Brave Man Road. But for some reason, I'm not too sure of the lore because I'm not that hardcore of a Kaiji fan to begin with. There's also the usage of the term Human Derby within this. But yeah, the reason why I'm just even talking about this is just to explain that there is a bit of a discrepancy between the names that I might use for this segment and what people might consider the segment's name to be. So for people who are fans of the series, I apologize if this like triggers you, but I'm just going off of what my understanding of the name of this segment is, so I'll mostly be just calling it the Brave Man Road instead. So this segment is the one that probably draws the most striking resemblance to Squid Game. Well, I guess it's the other way around, where Squid Game seems to draw a very striking resemblance to this work, since this came first before Squid Game. And by this, I'm talking about the segment in Squid Game where they actually have two like glass panels and they need to jump across to the other end. The big difference is that within Kaiji, it's not about just getting to the end, where with Squid Game, you kind of could have it such that if the first guy was just really good and very lucky, everyone could get across. With this, you don't really have that, in the sense that the only people who would actually get a reward from clearing this thing would be the first two people to reach the end. And the way it works instead is that between the platform where the contestants are standing on and the end goal are just 4 metal beams, and the 12 contestants have to basically race across and get to the other end within the first or second position, after which you'll be basically given money. Not get your debt fully cleared in that sense, you just be given a stack of a certain amount of money instead. Another big difference is also the fact that unlike in Squid Game within this, if you fell off the thing, it wasn't lethal. Like, the height was intentionally set such that if you fell off the thing, you would be severely injured, but it wouldn't kill you. And the reason why it was done in this way is because the contestants were not really being held against their will. They were basically being given the choice of whether or not they wanted to run across for their debt. They could just leave at any time if they didn't want to deal with this. And by setting it at a level where it wouldn't kill people, essentially what they were trying to do, the people who set up this game, was to give people even more of an incentive and drive to not only get across, but to feel less bad when they have to push another contestant who's in front of them off the thing, because essentially you won't die if you fall off the thing, so the money, maybe it's worth it. And if you push someone off, yeah, they'll be very badly injured, but they won't die, and that kind of like corrupts the morals of some people into being willing to push people off. As a game, this one doesn't have as much of the whole bluffing thing, but it still focuses more on the human aspect of it, because with the original show, what essentially happens is that Kaiji essentially spends the entire segment contemplating whether or not he wants to push the person in front of him off of the beam. We'll get more into what happens at the end of this when we get to the end of the game so that I can contrast the two. So once again, with the way that this game was set up, you actually had a really boring segment minigame to play instead. Essentially, the entire of this minigame was just you had a beam and you had two crosshairs. You just had to move the crosshair forward on the beam and make sure that it stays on the beam at all times, and as long as you do, you'll be fine. You know, it's a lot like playing those carnival games you had as a kid where you basically had to get the metal hook across to the other end of the long metal wire thing, and if you touched it along the way, it would sound off a buzz and go like zip, you failed, and something like that. Essentially that, but with a slight twist, because not only do you have the original crosshair which you need to keep on the beam, but you had a second one on the outside of the original crosshair as well that would like move left and right. It moves more to the left and to the right respectively when your cursor is slightly tilted to the left or the right of the middle of the beam. So you basically have to measure and ensure that your cursor stayed dead in the center of the beam, or at least if you're on one side or the other, that you constantly readjust it so that it actually goes back to being centered at some point. If the big circle moves to the point where your mini circle, your original crosshair is out of it, the character Kaiji will actually go into like this like rebalancing minigame where you needed to scratch the screen really quickly in order to rebalance him. No matter how many times I tried it, I couldn't actually complete that like QTE that was required. You know, all you really needed to do was to shake the thing across like very quickly across the screen, but for some reason, no matter how much I did it, it just didn't work. So essentially, I just had to end up just clearing the thing without entering that point a single time. This all sounds really simple, right, on the surface. But like once again, like with everything else within this game, this is a deception, it's a lie to fool you into thinking that things are going well. But really, the game actually doesn't tell you this, but there's actually a time limit for this segment. And in order to make the time limit, you basically have to be running with your cursor nearer to the maybe like 75% mark on the screen for most of the segment of the time. And if it is not around that point, even if you get safely to the end, you will just fail and the game wouldn't actually tell you why you failed. You just know that you failed and that no matter how fast you run at the endpoint segments. So if you actually failed this part, you would just basically be stuck there wondering what you did wrong, because there isn't really anything given as a hint why it happened. And the worst part about this is that if you actually get a game over during this segment, during the game over menu, unlike with the previous segment, with this one they actually tell you that you could actually, for a penalty, right, you're actually being punished for this, remember, for a penalty, restart this entire minigame. If you do not wish to incur the penalty, however, you need to go back to the start of the game, meaning that you actually have to replay the entirety of the rock, paper, scissors segment purely just so you could play this segment again. We'll talk more about what the penalty actually is for later on. But essentially, if you wanted to do a full clear of this game, you need to clear everything perfectly without failing a single time. Which is just horrible, especially for this second segment. Like, as simple as it might sound initially, I actually spent like 2 hours on this segment just staring at the stupid line in the middle of the beam all the way through till the end. It's almost impossible for me to explain how fucking horrible this entire experience was. Like, the first time I played this segment, it took me 2 hours. And the thing is that I stood there or sat there staring at the line for so long that I actually physically got a headache by the nearer to the end of this entire segment. For the record, this segment only really takes 5 minutes to clear, so I took almost 24 times the amount of time that it would take to actually perfectly clear this, just to clear this thing. Like this entire segment, really, it just made me feel like I sucked so much at games that it made me feel like I was that one game journalist who couldn't clear the Cuphead tutorial. No, I shouldn't say that, that's a little mean. You are not that bad at games, okay? Don't be so mean to yourself. Because essentially, if the beam moves really quickly like this, you need to move your cursor as quickly to make sure that it's in the middle of the beam even then. And all while ensuring that the big circle around it also follows in a way that doesn't cause it to destabilize. All while going at a very high speed, so there's very little reaction time to move along with the thing. And due to the fact that you need to be near the front of the beam to get that high speed, there is very little time for you to quickly move or react to like an additional space in front of you to figure out like, okay, so I need to go here and here based off the additional like space I can see in the front. With the fact that you're already close to the front, you don't have any of this kind of leeway as well, so a lot of it becomes really just quick reflex, moving and quickly shifting with the thing, all while balancing the beam. So there's a lot of things to take into account. And if you're looking at the bigger circle crosshair around the smaller one, you could also just lose track of the small one and just accidentally shift off the bar. And the thing is that once you get into the zone, like trying to figure out what to do here is not too bad. The issue is that the game actually never gives you the chance to get into that zone due to the fact that every 5 meters out of the 25 meters that this thing is, which basically around every 1 minute or less, you basically come across one of these. You have a cutscene that will play that would take like maybe 10 to 30 seconds, which basically are parts of the segments from the original show as well. And this will essentially break the whatever vibe or role you were in, because you're just basically being taken out of the entire thing you were concentrating on and being forced to go through a cutscene instead. And on top of that is the fact that when you get to the later half of this thing, the beam actually gets thinner as well. That's also something that happens within the original show, but essentially it gives you even less of a leeway to react to things at that point. And you need to do all of this while also remembering that if you fail at any point on this thing, if you were to reset with a penalty, you would be sent all the way back to the start. So it doesn't matter if you cleared the first 4 segments at 20 out 25 meters, or you were at the first segment. If you failed, you redid the whole thing. And if you didn't want to get a penalty, you needed to restart the entire game, which would basically just ruin, like just destroy any form of like vibe or good like beat or heat. This sounds like a wrong thing, but whatever like groove you were in. This sounds like a boomer thing as well. All of that is going to be lost because you're just going to be constantly dragged out of the gameplay mode and put back into it at some point. I find the tempo of this mode to be very horrible with the cutscenes in the middle. Now granted, during the anime as well, you kind of had all of this like character thoughts and interactions happening while he was crossing the beam, but really in that, the act of crossing the beam in and of itself wasn't something you were really paying as much attention to. Like the main focus was more on like how people were reacting to everything around them and all the things that were happening, and that was the main point of this segment. Another reason why this has a lot of similarities to Squid Game is also due to the fact that all the contestants were crossing this bridge. Essentially below it there were actually people on the spot who were watching them cross and just like cheering and like betting on them at like quite literally like a human derby, hence the name. The big difference is that with this one, people were like screaming, like you could see them being complete degenerates, like screaming at the contestants, taunting them, berating them, or throwing shit at them as well. It looked even worse than what happened in Squid Game because of the fact that now you actually could see all of this happening, and it just felt like more visceral, I guess, and impactful when you have the contestants being live just berated and treated like animals by the people who were there watching them. With this game, the whole thing doesn't really matter because of the fact that you only get periodic cutscenes of those people, and whenever the cutscenes do trigger, they kind of do just take away from the game more than anything because they are basically breaking the tempo of the gameplay. So the gameplay feels like shit, the tempo of the whole thing is very off, and on top of that, the main part of the scene that was what made it entertaining in the anime was also lost because of the fact that all of the interaction, the human interactions between all of the other contestants as well, it just wasn't there to the same extent because a lot of it had to be cut. But yeah, let's talk about the clear condition, like what you need to do to actually win in this, because like I mentioned, just getting to the end is not enough on its own. You actually need to get to the end fast enough, and on top of that, there's something you actually need to do, which is that you actually need to make a moral choice of whether or not to push the person in front of you off the bridge. is quite interesting due to the fact that you can essentially go down the path that the main character did not within the anime. And you would think that if you went down the original path, the plot would progress as normal and you would be able to proceed. And if you did the thing that he did not do, perhaps you would get a different path and be rewarded with a different, like, alternate storyline or something, right? Nope. You don't actually get a choice in this. The thing is, you can't actually do what Kaiji does within the series itself, because what Kaiji essentially did is that when given the moral choice of deciding whether or not he wanted to push the person in front of him down, he chose not to do it. And because he didn't do it, he actually lost that game. And he doesn't get the money, and he actually, like, after the match, just sits there in despair, realizing that his desire to make the good choice basically resulted in him getting no form of, like, result whatsoever, and that lack of result is gonna haunt him because of the fact that now he's stuck with his crippling debt. Like, if he chose to not push the guy down, you just get to the end, the facilitator at the end will just basically go like well, looks like you didn't make it cross in time. Kaiji! Like, it's like some fucking Gaki no Sky episode or something. It's completely horrible, and the thing is that, like, they essentially will not let you make the same choice that the anime did. So if you knew the anime, you kind of wouldn't get, like, scanned here, because if you did it all the way to the end, you would get failed, and if you wanted to clear the game perfectly, you now have to restart all the way from before the rock, paper, scissors segment as well. Instead, you had to push the guy down, and when you push him down and you kill the guy, like, Kaiji reacts for a little bit, but then he just, like, turns into a fucking, like, emotionless animal, and is just like, nope, I'm gonna completely forget that I just, like, almost murdered a man there. If you do not come in the first or second position in this, you just game over outright. Which I find to be really odd, because one, it kind of just goes off tangent completely from what the original series and its message was about, especially for this segment. And the thing is that him killing this guy actually doesn't really matter to the rest of the plot going forward from this point within the game as well. Like, it does not change him as a person, it does not lead us down, like, some darker alternate path. Like, if this was a game where you doing this actually led to future segments of the game, like, the plot is just gonna become completely different. It's like an if route for, like, what happens if Kaiji turned into a monster instead of trying to keep some of his values. That would actually have been interesting, but this was not it. It's not gonna matter for the rest of the game. But yeah, after this, there's also another slight plot deviation in that in the original series, the reason why they go on to the next game and let Kaiji play there is because each round is supposed to have 2 winners, but some of the other rounds only had 1 winner, so they were basically spare winning. So they decided to let people who came in runner-ups who didn't have a ticket also go on to the next game and compete for this ticket. In the game, however, at this point you kind of have a very weird time continuity issue, because first up, you are moving on because of the fact you won. So what happens is that when you win and you get there, the main villain guy, Tonegawa, he does the exact same thing again. He tells you that, hey bitch, you ain't gonna get your money, play another game. And then it basically forces you into the 3rd game. However, what is a bit odd is the fact that even though only the first 2 would get the progress, like, if you came in 3rd, remember, you don't get the progress, but what happens is that in the next segment, the people who initially won the race that Kaiji was in, the 1st and 2nd place, both turn up in this point as well. So they tried to keep the contestants in each segment the same, but they rewrote it such that it doesn't make sense anymore why all of those people are there, because by making Kaiji in the first 2 and the 3rd a guaranteed eliminate, then there's no reason why Kaiji would be here along with the 2 very important characters for this next segment. Yeah, just don't think too hard about it. Just relax, right? Relax, have a drink. Just a quick shot of vodka should be enough, right? That'll be fine. One shot of vodka. So this 3rd game is basically the 2nd game again. You're crossing a metal beam once again, except this time the metal beam is situated between 2 buildings on the 22nd floor. So unlike in the previous one, if you fall off this one, you basically just fucking die. And another difference is also the fact that the beam itself is electrified. Within the original series and the game, these 2 things are kept constant. However, in the context of the game, the fact that the thing is electrified doesn't really matter, since you don't really interact with it any different. Like, the way that they crossed it in both the anime and the game is just that they just walk across it. It's just that if you touch it with your hands or any part of your body that isn't the rubber on your shoes, you will get shocked. Which within the game, they don't actually make use of this at all. So you're basically playing the exact same minigame as before, with some slight twist to it so that it's not completely fucking boring. To be honest, this part of the anime, it actually really got me in the feels quite hard. Like honestly, I think I teared up a lot at this point because it was actually just so depressing what happened during the story during this segment of the anime. Because all of the characters that Kaiji has basically been working with up to this point, all of the friends he has made and that he's competing in this segment with, all of them will die. And the worst part is that in this segment, there isn't even a competition. It's not a case of like betrayal that killed everyone. Instead, it was actually Kaiji's own actions in a way, in that while many people were afraid of getting on the beam in the first place, he was the one who gave everyone the encouragement to push on and basically egg them on to do it. And in the end, all of them panicked and fell off the thing in one way or another, except for the last. It's actually near impossible to try to help like support the others if they start to slip as well. Because if they fall and you grab them and you fall, you're both just completely dead. So he led all of them into this situation where he would then be unable to support them. And even the one guy that he did manage to try and support just fell to their death as well. So essentially he couldn't save anyone and his own encouragements killed everyone, and it was a very depressing scene. With the game, only segments of this, like drips and drabs here and there, are actually told through the anime still cutscenes and the usual visual novel-esque like cutscenes where you just have like two character portraits there. I really have to thank how boring this scene was, because it was precisely due to how boring this was that I was actually staring at the character stills. And it was because of that I realized how horribly cropped they were. Like, seriously, I could do a better job of this. Just making my own thumbnails. How the fuck do people actually mess it up this badly on a professional level? The plot segments were cut out as well up to this point. Like, within the game, like, you probably wouldn't know who most of these people are. Like, you would probably have just like met them at this point or like seen them appear in one or two cutscenes before this, but there hasn't been much development up to this point to actually get these characters to mean anything to you. Like, if this game was your first experience of the series like mine was, I did not know who these people were. I just saw like random dudes just like start screaming and falling off the thing, and then like Kaiji bawling his eyes out at like literal nobodies that he has never met before. And it all felt very jarring, and then I went to watch the anime and I was like, oh shit, these people actually were like his rock, you know, they were the things that supported him up to this point and gave him the energy to go on, and they were all just dead. And like that, the level of plot that was removed was actually shocking to me, because it made the entire scene and all the cutscenes that happened during this point feel like it didn't mean anything. Meanwhile, the gameplay segment was exactly the same as the second part, but somehow easier for some reason. Like, with the second part, you kind of had a time limit. You needed to get to the end really quick, so you needed to move as quickly as possible. With this second iteration of the game that happens over here instead, however, you don't actually have a time limit. Like, they tried to make it similar to the original work in that sense, where they just told them, like, there's no competition. You can all reach there and you'll all get your money. You just need to get across and everything will be fine. And within this, it's like, it kind of does still exist as well, in the sense that like there is no time limit, but because of the fact that there's no time limit, it's actually easier because you can take your time and slowly move across instead. In spite of the fact that they added more gimmicks to try to kill the player, the gimmicks don't have the same level of difficulty impact because of the fact that, for example, for one of the segments, the gimmick that they added was that a wind would blow, and for the wind, whenever it is blowing, if your cursor was on the center or on the wrong side of the bar such that it would actually move in the same direction as the wind, it would start to move in that direction even faster than it actually usually would. But the thing is that if you completely stop your movement by moving your cursor all the way to the bottom, your cursor's movement, the outer ring, will not be affected at all. So you could easily just evade the wind, which blows periodically just by stopping and starting. And this result, it just does not have the same level of difficulty as the second half, where if you had this wind in the second half with a time limit, it actually felt like it would have been terrifying due to the fact that you now had to struggle with like getting across quickly enough while the wind basically fucks with the reticle as well. But with this, you can basically like kill off the entire gimmick by just stopping whenever the wind comes. Yeah, once Kaiji and the one remaining survivor get to the other end of the beam, this is where you get the big twist wherein Kaiji, with his very big, like super good observation skills, he kind of notices that something is wrong because at the other end of the beam, like the people within the room, the people who are watching them were acting very suspiciously. And he shouted out to the other guy to stop, and the other guy didn't listen and fell off. And then Kaiji, realizing that he is trapped and can't move forward, started to look for the other way to progress on. And like this part, in my opinion, was very important to the series because it also was a very good way of showing the type of person that Kaiji was, in the sense that he is largely a good-natured guy with a degenerate gambling addiction. But aside, when you put all of that aside, he is also very normal of a person, in the sense that like he has the same level of fear that a person would have in a like rationally in a situation like this. But when push comes to shove, when everyone else is depending on him, he is the kind that would step up. And so like watching the people around him die the way they did basically was what gave him the ability to overcome his fear while on the beam, and he basically managed to push through to the end. And not only that, even in this situation, he still managed to, through his powers of observation and understanding of his surroundings, spot the actual appropriate way to move on, and managed to just progress on to the next part. Like, it's really cool because like the game itself, the beam itself didn't really do much in the entire thing. It was all very focused on the characters and showing like the type of people that they were before they died and what type of person Kaiji is. And the thing is that all of this is really lost in the game as well, because when you get to the end of the beam, like they just play the cutscene of what Kaiji did in the anime, in spite of the fact that they have fucked up the continuity of everything up to this point. It's very boring and just didn't like it much because it's basically the anime plot but worse. And if this game was actually your first introduction to the series, you would basically have no idea why like all the deaths mean so much to him either, so everything would just be very jarring and like it would pull you out of the immersion instead, I feel like. Either way, with both, Kaiji gets to progress on, and when he does, he is then able to go to the top and he asks for the money that he is deserved to him to be given to him. And he is told by Tonegawa, the villain man in the suit, in case you've forgotten, because he's been like so unimportant till this point for the most part. He tells Kaiji that the round has been invalidated and he will not get his reward. This happens in both, due to the fact that while they were crossing the beam, Kaiji actually did try to ask him to turn off the electricity and let everyone forfeit the thing, and most people were actually in agreement with it. It's just that what happens is that he actually delays turning off of the electricity, thereby making them think that he won't do it, even though he did. And so like they continued to push on and just fell off the beam as a result, in spite of the fact that the electricity was already off and they could have just shuffled back. And basically he just like tricks Kaiji and the rest into continuing with the thing, and then just invalidates the money in the most cruel fashion possible. The big difference is that in the original anime, the head mastermind man comes out here and he actually tells Kaiji that like, yeah, you know what, you're right, it's kind of unfair that this motherfucker turned off the thing at the wrong timing and made you guys go on, and then you cleared the thing as a result and you don't get your money, so we'll let you play another game. And if you complete that game, or like if you do well in that game, we'll not only give you the amount you're due, but we'll allow you to earn even more in a competition between you and like whoever we want. In the game itself, however, the mastermind actually just does not appear here. Tonegawa is just like, we invalidated your thing, and if you want to get it, you're gonna have to play another game. So like, it makes it feel very silly because in the game, it's just a case of like he's just literally being held for ransom and just like being forced to play game after game like this is a Saw movie or something. Alright, moving on to the fourth minigame. Or well, I guess the third one, because the actual third one is kind of very mid instead. We have E card. Yeah, the name did end up being quite unfortunately similar to the name and of that one meme, and yes, I did actually get the card set just for the sake of this video. For the actual series, this is arguably the biggest game and the most climatic one as well, since this was the game where Kaiji, the main character, goes up against the big bad, which was Tonegawa this entire time, all for the sake of revenge for all of his friends who had died. In this game, it's a little more contrived, the reason why he's even going up against that dude in the first place, but either way, this was supposed to be the big scene where he goes up against the main villain of the series till this point, aside from the mastermind dude. So obviously it's gonna be a big dramatic like 1v1 card game thing, and that's what a large part of the original series was. You kind of have the same thing going on in the game as well. The whole like him playing for the money because he really still needs the money to pay off his debt and the debt of his friend who is now dead in the previous game. But at the same time, the whole revenge angle for all of the suffering that both Kaiji and all of the people he was with, his friends who have all died as a result of this game, have gone through, is kind of not really there at all anymore, due to the fact that his friends are barely developed in this game, so there's barely any form of relationship that we can sense between him and the other contestants. And also due to the fact that Kaiji just kind of seems like a worse off person than in the actual series itself. Like, he does all of the worst and most horrible possible actions, he barely helps anyone else. So like, him being the kind of good-natured person who just wants to stick it to the man for all of the suffering that everyone has to go through, kind of don't feel it as much either. Either way, this was supposed to be the dramatic 1v1 between the two of them. However, like everything else in this game up to this point, we can't just have a good plot being represented in a game, or like the plot being elevated to something more. No, instead of anything good happening here, or just a faithful recreation, they decided to add in two mooks who you have to play against first, before you can actually play against the big bad himself. Like, it adds no value to the thing, although I guess you could say that from a gameplay perspective, it kinda somewhat makes sense, because with the original series itself, the game was something that, you know, it's just a social deduction thing. You just sit there and you basically play out cards accordingly, and you just like try to read your opponents and play out the right cards at the right timing. But with this, you basically have mini games for every form of like way you could play out the card. So as a result, I guess giving the players some sort of tutorial would be nice, but at the same time, the first MOOC alone, I feel like the entire run itself took a little too long for a tutorial. And the thing is that it only really gave you a sense of two of the mini games that you would have to play, and not all of them. And when you play against the second MOOC, you're basically playing the parts you play against the first MOOC, and also basically adding on the segments after, wherein essentially you start first playing 3 rounds, and then with the second MOOC you play 6 rounds, so that when you play against the final dude you can play 12 rounds. So to that end, let me quickly explain how the card game itself works. Essentially, both players are given a hand of 5 cards, and the cards have 3 different varieties, which are these 3 here. That one didn't show very well. So you have the Citizen, the Emperor, and the Slave. So the way these 3 cards work is that they kind of work in like your Fire Emblem-esque weapon triangle, where the Citizen beats the Slave. I don't know how I'm supposed to hold the cards for this segment, but the Citizen beats the Slave, the Emperor beats the Citizen, and the Slave beats the Emperor. And how it works is that instead of each player getting all 3 of the cards, both players are given 4 of the Citizen, 1 player is given the Emperor, and 1 player is given the Slave. So you have 4, and then 1 player have 1 of these each. So needless to say, the more astute of you will probably have noticed by now that the guy who has the Emperor card has a very big advantage, because he has a very high chance to win. And with the way it works within the show, essentially what they would do is that the 2 players will rotate between playing both hands every 3 rounds. So one guy will start playing the Emperor, and he'll rotate to playing the Slave. Then you'll just play 2 sets of this for a total of 12 rounds altogether. And the way that it worked within the show is that before the match started, Kaiji was given a choice between wearing one of 2 saw-esque devices. Either one that drills into your eardrum, or one that drills into your eye. Because apparently the way that they wanted him to wager in the match was that, because the way that they wanted him to wager within the show is that they wanted him to wager the number of centimeters that the thing will move forward into either the eye or the ear. And the thing with it is that while it might sound very insanely Saw-esque, the thing with how it was designed is that you have 30 centimeters of leeway, and there are only 12 rounds, and your minimum bet is 1 centimeter. So essentially, if you were very conservative, you would never actually hit that total amount, and you'd actually be able to get out of the whole thing safely. And if he won, he'll basically be given a set amount of money as a reward for winning. And the thing is that if he won as the Slave rounds, he will basically be given 5 times the amount of money than if he had played during the Emperor rounds, due to the fact that it's a lot harder to win with one than the other. So the way that it worked within the show is that you would just basically and the way it works within the show is that one player will play out 1 card first, and then the other player would then play out their card, and you would try to guess and beat the person with the card that would win the round. Very simple, once again, like every other game so far. At this point, we're like, what, on the 4th mini game in talking about this game. I don't think that anyone who has watched to this point is going to expect that this company would actually bother with the whole human element in any of this anymore. Like, I get the feeling that if you force these people to make a visual novel, they'll probably make one with some kind of inanimate object or something so that they can portray as little humanity as possible. Something like printers or some... Oh shit, someone already did that better than they would have, huh? But yeah, as a result, you're basically going to be doing a lot of what you did in the very first minigame, where you're just playing minigames within the minigame, trying to basically Austin Powers blackjack your way into finding out his card so you can play the right card. So as a result, you have 4 different minigames. The first one being the one where you would play if you went first. This game is basically just slots, except that you can stop each wheel individually, and it's a bit more of a reflex timing sort of thing. The reason why this one is more slot-ish, I suppose, is due to the fact that if you throw out this card first, it's a gamble to basically whether or not your opponent will throw out the thing that you need them to throw out, and so they try to make it feel more gambly. Then the second one is basically just Simon Says. Moving on to the third one, however, that one was, I don't know what this is supposed to be. You basically are given a map on the bottom screen where you can kind of see like where the goal point is, and you're supposed to then navigate to that point without the map, and if you get to that point, you basically read the card that he threw out, and then, yeah, man, do I look like a rocket scientist to you? Do you think I understand the fucking theory of relativity of like how small their brain had to be when traveling through the speed of light to decide on like putting this in as a mini game to deduce the card that someone's gonna play? Let's say this one was pretty easy, so I guess it's fine. Very draggy though, since if you can't like do it, it takes like 1 minute. But at least this game is still more fun than the 4th minigame, which is just spam clicking on cards to prevent them from flipping over and just surviving a set amount of time doing this. Unfortunately for you, you don't get to know how much time that is though, since they don't even show the timer on the screen. Are we supposed to be having a fun experience over here? Because I feel like that's very lacking thus far. You basically need to play like a total of 18 rounds of this, the 12 rounds with Tonegawa himself, the 6 with the second guy, and then the... No, that's 21 rounds. Yeah, math, there we go! 21 rounds, 12 with Tonegawa, 6 with the second guy, and 3 with the first guy. So it gets very draggy trying to complete the entirety of the thing. And you do have to play out most of the rounds, especially when you're playing as a slave, because of the fact that you basically can only throw out your winning card when he throws out the Emperor, as compared to when you're playing the Emperor, you can throw it out whenever he plays one of his 4 like citizens. So when you're on the Emperor card set, you can very quickly like seal a round, but when you're playing as a slave, if the AI decides he wants to throw it out on the 5th round, then every single round is gonna basically last like all the way until the end of the 5th card thrown, so it can get very time consuming. Although credit where credit is due, they did make the minigames feel quite fitting as far as they could have to how difficult it would be to play your cards on each of the individual like types. So like when you're playing first, the fact that typically you're getting the roulette game makes it such that it's very high risk to play the slave, since it's a lot harder to basically get them to roll out the Emperor. So you don't want to play it out on the rounds where you're playing first, you want to play it out on the rounds where he plays first and then watch his reactions, is how they typically talked about it as well. And because of how the roulette actually worked, it did make it feel like the most difficult of the 3 mini games. So the fact that when your rounds tend to be more high risk and difficult, you're getting that. And then you're getting the other 2 during the rounds where you're supposed to read your opponent and like try to skill your way through deducing what they're actually doing with their cards. You get the other 2 minigames instead, it kinda does work out a little better. And you do get a variation in the minigames between the other 2 for whether you're playing the Emperor or as the slave. So yeah, I guess it's not the worst. They did get at least some slight, very small, like really like tiny ass green level of world's smallest violin level of like fittingness to it, I guess. Well, yeah, obviously this means that all of the tension from the way it initially went within the show was lost, because the way it worked in the show was that initially Tonegawa actually told Kaiji that like, hey, I have the power to read minds. Which should be a little worrying, because that means that if Kaiji started thinking about dicks, then Tonegawa would be like reading dicks the entire game through, which feels like a very like legit like brain tactic you could use against him. But yeah, they basically were like going like they can read people and their emotions and stuff very easily. And then like behind the scenes, what's actually happening is that they had put a sort of like heart rate or like health detector within the thing he was wearing on his ear, so they could basically like check Kaiji's pulse, his sweat levels and everything to try and figure out when he is trying to take a risky move and use that as a way to deduce when he's going to play what card and therefore allow Tonegawa to win. And a large part of the match was initially like the highs of like you thinking that Kaiji can do it and then it falling down as he like starts to lose and not know why, and then him finding out what happened and then pulling off the super big brain play here that let him win back everything that he needed in the end, like trumping all of their cheating. And it was really cool and all that, but like with this, all of that doesn't exist, so he is not gonna play out the card that instantly counters you every time you do it without like knowing what card he's gonna play next. Instead, by the time you get to him, basically you would have 21 medals if you won all of the games against the other two mooks, and you need 50 to basically clinch the complete victory. So the maximum amount that they allow you to wager at this point is 30. Yeah. You see where I'm going with this, right? So the funny thing was that I actually thought that the mini games against Tonegawa as well would be really easy, because against the mooks it's really easy. So the first round in, I actually like just bid the maximum thinking I would win, and then it turns out the mini games were actually way harder than the other two, and I actually got really close to losing, but I did win out in the end. And as a result of that, I basically hit 51 out of 50. I have hit the target for the match within the first of the 12 rounds. So the last 11 rounds, the thing is when you hit the targets, you still have to play on. So I had to play through 11 rounds with like no stakes at all. I basically had just won out instantly, and there was no reason for me to play the rest of it, but they just forced you to do it anyway. So a large part of that eventually ended up bringing me like trying to find the optimal way to lose quicker instead, so that I could just basically progress to the end. Because the thing is that it will never pierce his eardrum. You can just go back to like 1 centimeter per round and just go through the whole thing, which made it very boring. Like the fact that they let you bid the maximum and that like Tonegawa wasn't cheating basically means that all you had to do was do what I did, get lucky on the first round, and the entire minigame is technically as good as over. The dramatic battle of the boss, you basically one-punched him at the start of the battle and the whole rest of it became meaningless. You basically hit him so hard he became brain dead and like impotent or something, and just couldn't do anything to you at that point. So yeah, it was very it was so disappointing, to be honest. Like all of the original like tension for the scene, which was everything that happened outside of the card game, was actually lost. And then on top of that, it's like the way they balanced it is such that you just don't even really have to be good at the game. You can just get lucky and instantly win it. But yeah, once you win the game, basically the mastermind guy who has revealed himself, he actually comes out, by the way, in the game as well. He comes out midway during your match with the E-card thing. After you beat the two mooks, he comes out and like shows himself at the Tonegawa game. He doesn't really do anything at all for the most part for the entirety of this game. During the actual like anime itself, he was actually kind of central to why Kaiji was able to figure out why Tonegawa was cheating, because of the way he was acting. So like that actually, him being in the entire scene, not only did it help to give the main character the ability to read the situation better, but it also kind of gave us an opportunity to see how much of a garbage human being that actual villain mastermind man was. So in both the game as well as in the anime, he then tells Tonegawa after he has lost to basically do a Dogeza for you, which is the Japanese thing where they do the on the floor and apologize. They get him to do it, but instead of just like doing it on the floor to apologize to you, he kind of brings out like a fucking like iron metal grill flame thing and gets him to like press his head against it and kneel on it and apologize to Kaiji. Like the whole scene was meant to show like how insanely unhinged the mastermind was and how much like of a sadist he was, and also to show that Tonegawa himself was basically just a pawn in the whole thing. He was just a cog in the system who was basically taking orders, or he'll be suffering like this as well. And the thing is that for some reason they had to make this the 5th minigame. Like I'm actually questioning whether I should even bother talking about this minigame, because the time it would take me to explain the minigame would take longer than it actually takes to clear the game itself. Because all you really have to do, and you only need to do this once, is hold down the A key on your DS or close the screen. You can choose which of the two you want to do. and try to get above 10 seconds while still staying as close to 10 seconds as possible. That's it. That's the entire minigame. And mind you, once again, friendly reminder, if you fuck this up, you're going back all the way to the first minigame, assuming that like you chose to do all of this for a perfect run. 10 seconds is all it takes to just kill your entire run. Isn't that fantastic? Like, mate, if I really wanted to play a minigame about cooking meat, I wouldn't want to like cook it here in this kind of form, you know. I would just go and like play Monster Hunter or something. At least that's a little more wholesome and fun. Anyway, that's the 5th minigame. Moving on. And this brings us to the 6th and final minigame. Yeah, that's it. We've already reached the end of the game. What, do you think there's gonna be more? I mean, you probably didn't. You probably checked the time codes. I do actually chapter most of my stuff, so you probably looked at that and realized that this was all. Yeah, that's it. We're at the final one already. And this final minigame also looks as horrible and shitty as the 5th one that just came before it. Because with this one, essentially the minigame is the paper, like tissue lottery thing. With the original, what essentially happened is that after beating Tonegawa and seeing him do the Dogeza thing, he then realized that this was the original mastermind and he needed to take revenge on him and not Tonegawa. And so he challenges him to a gamble for even more money, where he essentially tells him that he will prepare something himself, which is a box full of like tissues with a lottery where one of it has a circle on it. And you basically just need to pull that one and the winner would win the thing. And for this game in the actual anime, what happens is that Kaiji actually wages 4 of his fingers. I'm gonna make it pretty hard to jack off with his fails there, but 4 of his fingers against, I think it was like quadrupling the amount of money he has. So he would be getting a lot of money if he won, and like it might seem pretty petty, but it kind of fits very well with this like situation at hand where Kaiji not understanding the value of the money that he has on hand and how much that money could go to, or like how obscenely wealthy these people could be. Basically just quadruples the money, thinking that this somehow would give him his revenge, although it would be nowhere near enough. But yeah, while this game is very simple compared to all the ones before it, even right down to its very base concept, the reason why it works and fits in the situation that it did in the show is because that by this point in the show, like Kaiji was completely like mentally and physically worn out. Like he saw his friends die, he was physically injured, like everything horrible that could have happened has already happened. And he's basically stuck in this place with nothing that he could use to create this game other than the literal box of tissues that was on the floor, hence why it became the way it is. But within this DS game, however, the game was something that Kaiji suggested to the mastermind to prepare instead. So rather than it being something he prepared and then challenged the guy to, it was something that he asked the guy to prepare for him. And the reason why Kaiji was challenging him to this competition kind of varies a lot between the two as well. With the original, it was because he wanted revenge, and I guess you could say he was trying to greedily try to upscale the amount of money he had by a massive amount as well. And because of the fact that he had the chance to watch the guy and observe how the mastermind was acting for a lot longer, he might have gotten the belief that he could beat the guy in a competition or like something like this if he were to prepare it himself. Because the thing is that Kaiji had basically cheated and had rigged it such that he could easily find the correct ballot, and the goal was to basically just look for the thing and get it and win against the guy. So seeing that the guy was an old man who seemed quick to temper and anger and also seemed to be a bit unhinged, perhaps he thought he could win. But with the game, he basically challenges the guy because of the fact that instead of getting cash as is, he was told after he beat Tonegawa that he would basically just have his debt removed, and that he couldn't help his friend remove his debt as well. So rather than being able to earn more, he would just be able to help the guy clear his debt, so no money would come Kaiji's way in any way, shape or form, which tonally doesn't really make sense with how the game has portrayed him to this point, when he's the kind of person who basically barely interacted with anyone, was quick to push someone else off just so that he could get forward. Like, he has not really shown much of actually being a good person who would want to willingly do this just to remove the debt of someone else, as compared to within the original, where you could just write it off the human greed and the whole complacency of the belief in his own invulnerability after he managed to beat Tonegawa and get this far as is. But either way, the mini game is Yep, that's it. You're basically supposed to just search through the box, basically pulling aside every single tissue on top of it piece by piece until you finally get to the correct piece. So the entire gameplay for this segment is just use your stylus to move each piece of tissue that he has ripped up aside until you find the correct one and then move it out of the screen. Mate, if I really wanted to move tissues around that much, I could just like jack off my room or something. I don't need to play a game where I just like move a bunch of tissues around and around like this. You know, if I really wanted to hit the right tissue while like, you know, I should stop making the joke. But yeah, this is all for the last mini game. At this point, I don't even know if I would consider this last mini game even a game. Like it's a lot like the one just before this, where with that one you just time 10 seconds. Like that's not a game. That's a fucking timer. And this is just like you're just moving a bunch of tissues aside. Like that's not a game. That's jacking off. Like this is like I feel like after the second mini game with the steel beam movement thing, we kind of just were going downhill all the way. You could say maybe E-card wasn't too bad, but this is how they wrapped up the game. Remember this. This is the last mini game. There's nothing after this. This is how they settled it instead. But yeah, okay, putting that aside. So plot-wise, in the original, Kaiji actually loses and loses his four fingers. Like basically the big bad actually figured out what Kaiji's plan actually was, and he managed to basically get around it and win instead. And Kaiji lost four of his fingers. So basically, he never won throughout the entirety of the original plot, right? He lost his fingers, he lost his ears. So basically, in the entirety of all of this, you can't really say that Kaiji actually won at all, right? He lost a limb. So the thing with all of this is that in the end, in the original, Kaiji never really won, truly, right? He lost the anti-up with this final match and lost four of his fingers. He technically, you could say he won at E-card, but he did lose a part of his body in the process as well. He lost all of his friends in the steel beam, and he basically went further into depth with the first game. Like, he has never truly been a winner. Like, the way the guy in the end of Squid Game basically became, like, the Squid Game hunter with his, like, K-pop pink hair and whatnot. Like, he doesn't turn into that. He literally just stays... I mean, he's a bit richer after this point because he did manage to get the money, although he didn't get to enter that. But he basically is someone who lost through and through. And all he can think of throughout the entire thing is to gamble more to take revenge. Like, it's a story of a very sad and, like, flawed character. But with this game, he wins. He actually wins at the end, and he gets his debt cleared, and he gets his friend's debt cleared, and that's it. It just ends there. You basically, he just goes back to his normal life after this until, like, I don't know how much later when someone comes knocking on his door and you just realize it's the guy who basically fucked him up at the start of the entire thing and told him that his friend basically got him into debt. He comes back and he tells you, like, Kaiji, that, like, hey, remember the boat that you were on? I hope you're feeling good, because guess what? The boat's back and you are specially invited to join. And Kaiji goes back. He just goes back and, like, gambles more, and that's the end. They completely changed the plot. They let Kaiji get his happily ever after, leave with ignoring everything that had happened to this point. Right? He could forget all of it. His debt is gone. Like, he just becomes a weirdo with a chronic death game fetish or something. Like, he's just actively going back even though he has no reason to. The plot has not made it out at all in this entire game to show that he wants revenge in any way, shape, or form within the game. He beat the dude! He has no reason to go back to any of this whatsoever, other than pure greed. And, like, after all the things that the game has done to this point, to try to make him out to seem like a good guy, while also sending conflicting messages as a horrible person, they basically just say that, like, yeah, this guy, he just has issues. He's a weird, like, underdeveloped brain man person with, like, no actual skills since he's basically unemployed, and he just, like, goes and gambles in death games to earn money instead. Because remember, the big difference between this game, the one that the entire like dev game he was in this game as compared to the original is that the dev game in this game includes every single step down the way, meaning he's gonna be going back to the fucking beam and doing all of that again, playing E-card, potentially getting his eardrums ruptured. All of that is gonna happen, right? It's not just the card like in the original. It's horrible. And the worst part is that if you actually got the normal end instead of the true end, he basically doesn't actually get to know what the name of the final boss mastermind is, which is why I have been like holding back on actually saying his name till now. Like Kaiji actually asked the guy for his name and he just sneers at Kaiji and goes like, you big scrap, you clearly haven't played this game enough. Go back and beat it all and come back again. And maybe I'll consider you more than this garbage. And he just leaves. So you don't even get to know the name of the bad guy, the big bad. And yes, I did say that there is a true end there. You want to know how to get the true end? I feel like I don't really need to tell you how now. It should have become clearly obvious how you would get the true end. How do I know this? Because I actually did clear all of it in the end without failing. Although I guess to say without failing is a bit of a cheese because I actually did use save states. Like I stopped playing it on the actual console and played it on PC so that I could record it easier as well. And during that process, I basically just save stated it, I guess. I am not going to risk the entire time waster that is all of the cutscenes from the start of the game till this point over and over again just to see that one horrible fucking scene. I saw it. It's not worth anything. It's completely pointless. Like completely. They basically gave you a separate ending where the guy just tells you his name and you are a special guest the next time you go back. Aside from that, nothing much changes at all. You get to hear a little bit more story about how your friend who's fucking dead, how like his family has been taken care of because your debt that he had, you helped him to clear it. That's it, right? It's not technically a separate plot point because remember, either way, his debt gets cleared, right? It's just that only in the true end do they tell you that it's been cleared. So really, like as a story, from a story perspective, nothing changes. You're just invited back the next time around. You don't actually get any form of visual representation the next time you go back, which if you choose to go back, it's basically just restarting the whole game again. Okay, that's it. You get nothing other than the satisfaction of hearing the villain's name. Like he'll tell you his name at the end of the true route, and it's like, yeah, okay, cool. Like, I'm not gonna see you again. The credits are gonna roll after this. Does it matter? I'm not gonna beat the villain. I don't get a chance to do it. And thank goodness they had the credits here, because I feel like a lot of the issues that I have with the game and wondering why it felt like the whole game was so bizarre could be explained by just looking at the credits, because really when you look through the entire thing, it only states there being one programmer. Even the worst Kusogame we've played till now, the one just before this, had 3. We've reached like minimum like skeleton crew levels. Because if you exclude all of the people who did basically sound and graphic design, not like there was much graphic design to begin with, since all of this game's like art was basically just from the actual anime. As if you exclude those people, only really 5 people worked on this game, and none of them seem to be designers, right? There's 2 directors, it seems, and 2 people who came from a separate company who are basically here to assist with this project. And that makes up the 5. We do not know in what capacity those 4 people are in this project in, but it doesn't seem like they actually credited anyone as helping with the game design. So I don't know if the one programmer also basically decided what the mini games were. If it were the case, I guess I can understand why the games were so simple, because like he's probably so overworked from having to code the thing up from scratch alone that like just like fuck it, just put in something simple so that I can say that I can code all of this into the game, right? Like he probably just like did the bare minimum at that point in terms of like actual design, because that's not his job to begin with. But yeah, looking at all of the credits, I guess it really feels amazing to me that like they managed to get this much assistance from the licensing company. And it surprises me how many people actually work on the graphics and sound design for this game, because really the BGM and the sound effects all sound very fuzzy and like low bitrate because of the fact that like I guess something about the sound system on the DS at the time wasn't too fantastic to begin with, but it wasn't something that seemed like it would need that many people, but you basically had more people within the sound design, graphic design. Hell, you even had more people in just the special thanks alone than the people who work on developing the game. Yeah, okay, like it makes a lot of sense why this game is so garbage, I think like out of all of the games I've played till now, this is probably the one that pissed me off the most. Like all of the other games, they've been bad, but to some extent they were bad, but I could still pull through them. They were boring. I could do something else while doing this, but with this one, it was so bad. I actually got a physical headache like halfway through the game. Like, I'm not mad. I swear I'm not mad. It just baffles me how bad this is. Like we played a lot of pretty bad games. Arguably, you could say this game is solid in the sense that there weren't many bugs, if any at all. But as a game, it's pretty boring. And there's barely any content. And like it's not even a very consistent game. With Pro Golf Saru, it was like you clear the game in 1 hour. Technically, you could also clear this game, this entirety of this Kaiji game, under 1 hour. Like when I looked at the time it spent to actually get the true end, I spent like 47 minutes of all of it, including retrying the save state. So the game can be cleared within less than an hour. But at least that game, it was consistently a golf game through and through. This, on the other hand, it's like I don't know what it wants to be. Like all of the mini games don't really have that much consistency between them. It felt like they were just trying to cash in on a big IP, which is probably what this is to begin. I mean, are we surprised? Suffice to say, I'm a little exasperated by this game, but yeah, the ending truly was such a shocker. The way they just like wrote everything off and like tried to make it like this like short, simple, and I was so shocked that when I was actually playing the game at the point, my jaw was literally just agape the entire time I was looking at the ending scene and the credits, because like it like kind of messed with my brain a little how they basically bastardized the entire ending of this game by just taking all of the things about the original that made it so dark and brooding in a way, especially when it comes to all the human sides of it. Right, the main character tries his best to do the good thing, and him doing the good thing, him trying to do all of this, basically hurt him, and he never truly won in the end. Obviously, there's more. There's like the story continues on from there, but when you end on this note, right, this first season alone, that's a very solid like dark story, and they just killed the entire thing by giving him a happy ending and turning him into a degenerate death game fetishist. So I would say this game is quite bad. That's probably one of the worst ones I've played out of all the horrible games I've played. I would say it's even worse than the game that Idea Factory made themselves like a little while before this one. I honestly enjoyed that game more than this, even though both are bad. But yeah, I guess that's all I really have to say about this game, right? Like, it really is not a good game. I mean, like, every time I talk about one Kusogame, it's obviously not a good game. They're all garbage, right? It's like the funny, what's his face name? Keanu Reeves meme, right? Like, it's like that, but in reverse. Instead of everyone being breathtaking, everything is garbage. But even among the garbage, I find this to be a extremely impressively garbage piece of garbage. It barely makes use of the DS's systems, which there are many games that actually innovatively use the systems. You know, like I'm not gonna complain too much about the graphics of the game, because there aren't any at all that were basically made originally for the game. The sound design, I'll give it a slide, because it might just have been a machine spec issue, so I'll not look at that at all. But like as a game, this is pretty bad. Like there is no consistent form of gameplay throughout. The story is uninteresting. Add on to this the fact that this game costs 5,000 yen as well, which at the time would probably have been closer to like, I don't know, like 50, maybe $40+. Yeah, that's not a fair price in any way, shape or form. Like it's cheaper, yes, than most of the other games you've talked about on this like series of videos, but 7,000 yen, 5,000 yen, either way, it's still really expensive. And for a game that is basically just 6 mini games with less than an hour of actual like full gameplay time, it's just like, for comparison, right? Fire Emblem in 2008, the game cost 4,500 yen, so you could get an actual Fire Emblem title cheaper than this game. So I don't know what they were trying to do with any of this. It makes no sense at all. Now, unless you really want to play Kusogames, I don't recommend trying this game, or any of the games I talked about in this video really. But if you want to enjoy like and see how bad these games are for yourself, even then, I don't think I would recommend this game. Like many of the others, I probably might still recommend for like, you know, the Sengoku Hime. The bugs were kind of funny. I probably wouldn't recommend that one either, but like, you know, Nugya is like, Yeah, it's nah. You know what? Actually, maybe all of them I wouldn't actually recommend people playing, except the baseball one. If you can get a bug copy, you just play it for 5 minutes. Just look at how bad the bugs are, and you just turn it off. Like on that level, I can probably recommend that one. But even among all of those games, I think this one I would very strongly not recommend, more so than the others. But yeah, that's all for me for today. Thank you all for watching this video. I feel like at some point I could feel myself like losing my mind a little. So like things may have gotten a little bit more disjointed towards the end of the video, but either way, I hope you enjoyed all of this nonetheless. I haven't set up the plan for what I'm planning to do for the videos next month, but at the very least I'm planning to do 1 or 2 about events next month, and then maybe the month after that or the month after that one. So like maybe May or June I plan to release the second part to the game industry video I did a while back. So if you're looking forward to that, you can feel free to. And I mean, now you know when it's gonna happen. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you can just feel free to watch the first episode, and hopefully you find it entertaining as well. If you want to see more like this in the future, do feel free to like and subscribe. And as always, thank you to everyone for watching this video, and a special thanks to Ran Yakumo, Rosio, Nick Green, Kari, and Jeong-Kwon Van Damme for helping to make it easier for me to get the stuff I need for these videos. You know, some of the silly stuff I want to do, sometimes it costs a little bit of money, and so this helps to cover those costs and also for the editing software. So thank you to everyone for helping to make both this channel possible and make it easier for me to make more weird shit like this. But that said, I'll be heading off now. So until next time, take care and... Oh no, where that went? Oh shit, I think I may have... Bye-bye. You know, initially I wanted to use like bandages for this bit, but I don't have bandages, so we're gonna try it with this and see if it actually works. Like this. This is gonna look so like bizarre to people who don't know what kaiji is, that I do worry a little if it's gonna be a bit over the top, but okay, that should be enough. We'll figure out a thumbnail from there.